Okay. Okay. So thank you. Welcome for joining us. My name is Sarah Chisholm, and I'm joined by the lovely and oh so talented Gaby Lorino. She's my co-host today, this evening, and BookSwell and Sideshow Books teamed up to bring you this reading of Made in LA, Volume 3, The Art of Transformation. The theme for this reading is Oh, the People You'll Know, all about Angelenos as characters. We have Tony from Sideshow Books, who is going to tell us a little bit about the bookstore. Take it away, Tony.
Hi, well, welcome. This is really thrilling to have everyone come in. I wish you could see the place. We've been deluged by books in the last couple months, so it's a little bit like an old growth forest of new books, old books, perennials, scraps of ideas and characters. So I'm sure people have already been talking about this, but really missed having people in the store, missed having interaction with character. It's a little bit similar that books and their writers are characters, and the conversation that you'll have when you open a book is as rewarding as conversations you might have in the bookstore. If you're in Los Angeles, please come. New stuff comes in every day, and this is backwards has come in recently, and I'm really happy to be a place that you could actually buy the anthology that we're gonna hear about today. So I'm thrilled. Thank you so much for asking me to be a part of this and letting me welcome you into the bookstore. And I hope you'll actually come in. I can really welcome you and make you some espresso and talk about characters. Anyway, that's all I've got. I'm looking forward to hearing from everybody else. What a great topic.
Thank you, Tony, for thank you so much for talking about your beautiful and wonderful bookstore. So we're going to have AP there do a little reading from his story, The City. Oh, he's like the king of darkness. That's what I that's what I call him. So let's have AP talk about his story.
Thanks, Sarah. My story is The City. It's a dark fantasy horror story set in LA, contemporary. I'm just going to read the first couple paragraphs from it. He takes a couple shots before leaving for the club, pops the mollies in the car ride over. 3 because that's how many it takes to even feel it anymore. 2 more hide in a small pouch in his crotch. Another shot at the club. Another capsule within an hour of getting through the doors. Soon after, he's shaking the last one into the valley between thumb and index finger and snorting it up his nose. There was a time when the stuff made him genuinely happy. The acrid taste of the post-nasal drip fools him into a shadow of that happiness. The first time had been so beautiful. He'd been breathless. Now he just grinds his teeth and sweats too much. He needs some K to balance everything out. Just a bump off someone's car key, then a hit from someone's vape, another drink, and adios, motherfucker. He pretends it's a delicate balance. In reality, he's only saying yes to anything that makes him believe he's interesting, living hard and fast like a Hollywood screenwriter is supposed to. Anything that sells the self-deception. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. So I have one question that I would like to ask you, AP.
Sure.
So I wanted to know, in your story, The City, Los Angeles becomes a character. What aspects or traits of living in LA inspired your version of Los Angeles as a character?
So something I thought about when I was writing this a lot was I'm a transplant. I've only been living here about 11, 12 years. But before then, I would come here and spend at least a couple of weeks every summer growing up with my grandmother here. I got a very specific view of what I thought LA was. And I think everyone that doesn't live here has that as well. And to me, that's a facade. Once you go deeper with LA, you discover that LA can be anything to anyone. It isn't just the vanity, the showbiz and all that. And so when I was writing this piece and thinking about the character of the city, I actually, in my mind, she was angry at the other character in my story, because he not only didn't put himself out there enough and do what he needed to do to make it, he treated the city like that facade. He didn't go any deeper than that.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Gaby Lorino, and I'm very excited to be co-hosting tonight. Up next, we're going to hear from Andrea Otten, and she's going to read to us a little bit from her story, Broken Glass.
Yeah, empty glass.
Empty glass.
That's all right. Hi, thanks everybody. Nice to see you again. And thanks to Book Show. Is it Book Show and Sideshow and Bookshop? There, see, there it is, baby. Okay, so this is deep into the story, and the character Izzy has already faced despair and has given her foster dog, or a dog, she rescued, away to a stranger to avoid a conflict. So I'm just going to start very close to the end. Down in the cauldron beneath the overpass, headlights shimmered. So many people. Life teeming in opposite directions. Izzy stretched her neck and tallied the height from the 5 to the farthest street below. Gas fumes and gin flurrying through her head. What was a life? The distance between top of the heap and bottom of the pile. She could cease the pain pumping through her with one decision. The glass shard was smooth and cold in her hand. She squatted with weight jamming into her heels and examined its sharpest edge. Thick bar glass, the soda fountain kind. She circled her hand around the widest part, pushed her thumb against the inside, and brandished the glass as a knife. The guardrail was rough under her hand. She breathed in, tasting dust, and emptying her mind of all the party people. Shook off the serpent-tattooed lady's face, and in a speechless drive to act, took the pointed tip and started to scratch. Lines became a boxy sorry. Next to sprayed letters, MC13, Terra Bella Boys, Paca Trace, she continued to etch, to confession, into the metal railing. Her scratches spelled out the name of the dog, Flory. Between honking horns and engines screaming by, the faint thump of music returned to her ears. She rose on trembling legs and surveyed her work. Sound wouldn't come to her voice now. She mouthed, "Goodbye, Flory." The dog's name glared back. Izzy's insides were hollowed out into a shape of an unfilled drinking glass, and her feet twitched out of time with the drumming ache in her palm. She squeezed the glass shard. Pain became strength as it pressed into her palm. The time to buck up had come. Lace the fighting boots tight and soldier on, or don't. Thanks.
That's very intense. And I remember I got broken glass from when I was doing the story trailer. I remember I kept having to look for broken glass, and wires get crossed.
Oh, right. Like I called the wrong bookstore, right, Tony?
Okay. Well, all of the bookshops that we work with go through bookshop.org. So bookshop.org is like Amazon, but it helps small businesses that sell books.
Right.
Keep more of their profits, hopefully make a little bit more so they can stay in business. So you weren't wrong. You just didn't say Sideshow.
Right. Threw it in there. Yeah, but I'm very excited, Tony. Sideshow.
Very good.
So I do have a question for you, Andrea. Your story opens up at a house party where your main character is at odds with her environment. the things that you were just reading about were getting worked out in the early part of the story. What personal experiences and observations led you to creating such a scene at the beginning? And are there any real life people who inspired the characters in your story?
Yeah, I really love that question too. Yeah, so it's a deeply broken, sad woman, kind of an iconic thing, right? She talks too much. She wants to be the center of everything. And so it's really more the why. So, because I think we've all seen this kind of person. And in LA, I think there can even be a pressure to be this kind of person, really on stage, really something to be seen, right? But this person herself is quite manipulative. She's a victim. And well, it reminded me of the kind of person who might be your friend who says she might commit suicide, or a friend who says, I've got cancer, and she really doesn't. So we're talking about that level of extremity there. And so actually what I did was took this as from a news story and went backwards and filled in the life of who I thought may have been at the brink of she was at the brink of despair in the news story, right? So I went back and sort of did a prequel to her life. Who was she? An origin story. So what I used actually was, you can look it up, but it's the histrionic personality disorder. And it's kind of fascinating, but it comes under praise me. So P stands for this and R stands for this. And so I used all those traits in that personality disorder to bring a person to life and try to keep her from being flattened as she was in the news story, and fill her up with a life.
Wow, that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm going to introduce a writer who basically, like Rosalind Tulsky. I read her story, and I don't know, I had the chills. It was great. So, you can give people nightmares that way, Rosalind. I just want you to know it's the most wonderful story ever. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Rosalind. Thank you so much, Rosalind.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to Sideshow for hosting this. My story, Tell Me Your Name, has two characters. A young 15-year-old girl who has wealthy parents, and a young homeless boy who comes to her door and asks her for money. And when she tells her parents what happened, she tells them that she was compassionate towards him and felt sorry for him. He gave him $20, pressed it into his hand, and said, I hope your day improves, and shut the door. So I was interested in creating a character who's unreliable. And I love creating a story where things are not what they seem. So when you read this first part of the story, she sounds really sweet, really nice. A lot of people slam the door in the face of someone who's asking for something. And so I love the idea of turning what happened on its head. And I'm going to read what happens after her parents, read the riot act to her and tell her she should have shut the door and called 911 or whatever she should have done. So I'm going to read the next little section where I establish her as an unreliable narrator. Of course, it didn't happen quite that way. They got the abbreviated version. Rewind. It's late, but I know they'll be gone for at least a few hours. I poke around in Melinda's night table and find her baking pen, one of the first things she bought in Los Angeles. I've just taken a tiny hit to get me through 450 flashcards when the doorbell rings. "Oh man, who's that?" I pat down my hair, which looks like a mattress explosion, kick off my Donald Duck slippers, and put on the suede ones. Melinda's voice floats in my head. "Now remember, Pammy, deep breath, only good thoughts." Things spin as I hurry to the far end of the condo. The lock groans. When I open the door, he is standing there, luminous under the nightlight, smiling, teeth as white as the whites of his eyes, hair as wild and uncontrollable as mine. He's my age, the first person I've seen in Pasadena who's my age. "Hi," I say, putting out my hand to shake his. But he seems shy and doesn't take it. He runs his palms down the sides of his pants, then mumbles his story about the lost job and no food for 2 days. "Why don't you come inside?" I say. "We have tons of food." He thinks for a moment, then says, "I don't want to disturb you, but I sure could use some money." "I'm studying vocabulary words for the SAT," I say. "It's like hell on wheels. You'd be helping me." He stands there a while, like maybe he'll do me a favor and come inside. I wish he'd make up his mind because it's cold out here and I'm shivering in my thin t-shirt. Eventually, he condescends to enter and crosses the threshold. There's no going back for him. Push the door shut and lock it.
That was go ahead, Rosalind. I'm sorry.
That was it. So that's the second telling of the story.
That was amazing. You know, just you really give us a character that is shockingly unreliable, like I had. And that's what I enjoy about the story, the unpredictability. So I wanted to ask you, so the main character is extremely unreliable. It's wow. Like I tell you, just it sends shivers down my back. It was such a great story to read. So just so unexpected. And can I ask you, what traits or truths of your main character begin to change as the story progresses? What or who inspired this character? So it's a double whammy for you.
Okay. Well, I wanted to be sure to keep the second character constant. The boy who comes to the door is exactly who he seems. And as a fictional device, I wanted to have several different tellings of the same story because that makes for such an interesting character. And I think it sends the reader for a loop because the reader thinks, "Oh my God, she's not reliable. Which version is correct? The first or the second?" And then the detective comes to the door and she gives yet another version. And I guess it was just my imagination playing with what could happen to this character. What is the extreme that we could take her? Because I think that a reader has certain expectations when you read about a homeless person comes to the door. In your mind, that's threatening. And her parents are threatened by it, and they're worried that something might have happened to her. So I really love the idea of creating a character who herself becomes more and more sinister as the story goes on. She's not based on any real life person I know, thank God. I guess this is how I get all the creepiness out of my system, by writing about them, because I'm not like that. This was not autobiographical. So that's all I'll say. And thank you very much. That was fun.
Thank you so much. And we're going to go back to Gaby.
Thank you. And thank you, Rosalind. I'm very excited to introduce Carter Mycroft next. Carter wrote a very interesting story called Shark News for our third anthology. So, Carter?
Yeah, thanks, Gaby. I'm going to read a section from basically the midpoint of the story. And we have two characters here. One of them is Hunter, who is a 20-something kind of burnout, recently relocated to Venice from the Valley. And he's working for Mike, who is a boomer who runs a ham radio show about sharks out of a shack in an alley in Venice Beach. And at the intro to this scene, Hunter has just set up a bunch of social media for the radio show that he's interning for Mike. And Mike gets really upset about seeing the Twitter page and the Facebook and all that stuff. So, cue scene. There was a heavy silence. The vein receded back into Mike's neck. He seemed to calm down a little. I shouldn't have yelled. You're doing great, but this internet stuff, we can't do it. Not yet. I'll delete it. No problem. I just don't want to be in the dark on things. Mike sighed. All right, then. Tell me what you want to know. What is the deal with Radio West Side? A tremendous blink. That station is the deal. Did you work there before? Work there? I founded the goddamn place. I built it from the ground up right here in Venice. I wanted to do something different from the other stations, not just play music and sports and political shit. I wanted to educate people. About sharks? Among other things. He looked at the roof. Back before you were born, we had a great thing going. 24-hour programming, reception through the entire LA basin, all licensed and accredited and everything. I did my shark news from 3 to 6, and my friends had their shows the rest of the time. There was real heart in it, you know? Hunter felt a wave of sadness. It was clearly paining Mike to recount all this. What happened? Mike gritted his teeth. Well, my son finished law school, then failed the bar and decided he wanted into the family trade instead. At first, I was all for it. He was sharp, ambitious, hip, a better businessman than me, I'll admit it. But the more power I gave him, the more we butted heads. He would tell me I was out of touch. I was running the business into the ground. He would say things like, people don't want to hear about sharks during evening rush hour. And finally, he knifed me in the back. He had me sign a contract I didn't read well enough, and he ended up with Radio West Side. He told me I could still do my show, but from 3 to 6 a.m. instead of in the afternoon. I told him to fuck off. That's the end of the reading.
Well, that really punctuates the scene. I have a question for you. I wanted you to kind of expand upon the fact that you have such an understanding of characters from different generations, and you did call out Mike as a boomer, which is significant to, the current social scene. What or who inspired you to write from these different viewpoints?
So thanks for the question. I think what I really wanted to get at, one of the things I really wanted to get at with this story is the way that people get left behind in various ways, whether it's by just the progress of social norms or by especially technological progress was something I was really interested in. Like in the story, you have a guy who's basically dedicated his life to a dying form of communication or of art or of education or whatever you want to call it. And he's basically he's lost his radio station because there's no market for it anymore. And now he's kind of clinging to the ashes of it with this weird little ham radio thing that nobody listens to. And he's very much in denial, which, is a flaw of him, I guess. But I think it speaks to something that I think is really sad, which is the way that we kind of, in my generation as a millennial, we take a lot of things for granted, like the internet and, really rapid communication and that kind of thing. And I think sometimes that we forget that to people who have lived twice as long as us, these are very new ideas still. And it's a lot to get used to. And we get frustrated a lot of the time by minute things, like having to help our parents sign into the Google Hangout and stuff like that. But I think that doing that in this story was weirdly I'm not going to compliment myself for this or anything because it was an accident, but it was weirdly predictive of a lot of the dynamics that I've experienced during the pandemic of really needing to connect with my family, like my older relatives, but not being able to because some of them are afraid to try and get on the computer, and it's like, I think it's really sad, and I don't know like what the solution is. And you have the same issue now that we have, like, vaccines rolling out, and it's really easy for people like me who are on the internet 25 hours a day to go online and sign up for a vaccine. But a lot of senior citizens and older people, either don't own a computer or don't, read the news on Twitter every day like I do. And, they're getting left out of the process. I just think all this stuff is like, it kind of like percolates in my head sometimes. And that's kind of what I was getting at when I wrote the story.
Well, good. Those are some really good insights, and it's very timely with COVID, especially. But I like the way that you've pointed out that people do get left behind, and there is you show a lot of compassion for that in your writing.
Oh, thanks.
So, good job. So I'm going to hand it back over to Sarah. We're going to move on to our next reading.
Okay, so we're going to I'm going to introduce A.S. Younglis, who wrote this amazing story about some children finding some creepy stuff, as she really takes it there. And it's like such an amazing story to read. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, Sideshow Books, which I love and I need to go to. So my story is called Unwanted Gifts. And as Sarah said, it's about two tweens. The older sister is a teen, but barely. And they one day are walking down the street and there's this weird burst of light in the sky. And when the light disappears at the foot of the girl, there's an object that wasn't there before. And she and her brother have no idea what it is. It's just a bizarre looking thing. And they don't know what it is, but they want to know. And so they pick it up. And the moment they pick it up, everything starts falling apart. So as kids at this age, at the tween age, where you're not really a little kid anymore, but you're definitely not an adult, and you're not even a teenager yet. So you're still trying to feel things out and relying a lot on adults and people around you to really kind of understand, but in a subtle way, because you're past that age of asking so many questions. You want to feel older. So they take this object to a group of men who like to hang out, and women who like to hang out on a dead-end street right around the corner from their apartment building. And one of the guys, his name is Martin, and Martin knows everybody, and Martin knows everything. So obviously he will have the answers. And that is right where I'm going to read from. I'm just going to read a small section of it. And they take the object across the street and head over to the group of men. The wind kicked up, bringing a chill I didn't expect in midsummer. I pulled my hoodie close and eyed Charlie, who was still standing next to Martin. Neither of them noticed the lack of lights. Martin was too busy telling Charlie vivid lies about what the thing could be. I picked up words like old plug and when I was your age, which were both tells translating to, I don't know, but so many people are listening, I'm going to pretend I do. Little C, we have to go, I said, turning nearly every set of eyes on me. Dad's home soon. Not now, May, Charlie bit out through a clenched jaw. Martin's explaining things, explaining the thing you found. More eyes found me. Martin's were two of them. Where'd you find it, May? Martin asked. Why is nothing working? One of the guys said. Maybe the piece of junk is turning everything off, Mr. P said. He scowled at me, petting the fuel tank of his motorcycle like a dog. Ever think of that? He tapped his temple before pointing in my direction. What did you do, little girl? I turned to Charlie, who joined their side in a fight I hadn't known we were having. He has it, not me, I said, squaring off my hips and pushing my jaw out. I just found it. Hand still on the bike, Mr. P leaned in, forcing me back a step. Where? Over there, right after the sky flashed, Charlie offered. I imagined ways to torture him when I got home. The sky, what? Martin said. I saw it, Mr. Preston replied, followed by the murmurs of others agreeing that they'd seen it too. Right before I got here, Martin. You were probably too busy or too stoned to notice. He spoke to Martin, but kept his attention on me. And what, you found that thing and decided to bring it here? And that is where I'm going to stop.
Thank you so much, AS. So I wanted to ask you a story. I wanted to ask you a question. Your story is about children finding something otherworldly. When something doesn't belong, it is almost always regarded with suspicion. How do the characters in your story deal with others regarding them as seeming out of place?
So, like I prefaced a little bit, the kids are kids. And I think for them, it being out of place, in my experience, to quote my son, why doesn't anybody ever believe me? Why doesn't anybody ever believe kids? And that is what sets them apart and puts them on the side of the object thing that they found. Because a lot of times, as a mom and as a person who's worked with small kids, I think a lot of times people who don't have experiences with children is they see them as unintelligent when it's really just inexperience. Because how can you have a ton of experience when you're 11 and 12 years old? You really don't. So for them in this situation, they're being held with suspicion because obviously they must be wrong. Obviously, they couldn't have found it there. Obviously, they don't know what they're talking about. These adults know what they're talking about, even though they're not really paying attention and they're starting to get panicked. So they're just trying to find the first thing to blame. And why not blame the kids? Because they're already being held in suspicion for the fact of just being a child who makes up stories and still uses their imagination too much. So yeah.
Thank you so much. What a
You're welcome.
great story. Wonderful to read. And I'm going to turn it back over to Gaby.
We're going to go along and speak with Barry. He wrote a story called Terminal Flight, which is very much in the noir murder mystery genre, and you will love it. So take it away, Barry.
Okay, well, thanks a lot. And thanks a lot to Sideshow. And Tony, I'm anxious to visit your store next time I'm in LA because the backdrop to where you were sitting looks like my den. So it'd be a very familiar place. Notice I didn't say messy. So like Gaby said, this is a kind of a straightforward type murder mystery. Body arrives with a dead, airplane arrives with a dead passenger on board. And two detectives, Parnell, who is the storyteller, and his partner Harbaugh, take the case. And I'll read you a small part of when they're going to visit what were then called stewardesses, one Carol from the flight. So Carol, Clancy was her last name, lived in a small apartment in Manhattan Beach, close to the pier. In that neighborhood, if you fall down in any direction, you're going to hit an airline employee. It's close to the airport and it's got enough bars to keep the airline crowd properly sedated between flights. She was on the second floor, and as we climbed the stairs, we saw that her door was open behind the screen. It was a bright day, as most are in Southern California, and it was black behind the screen. A radio played rock and roll somewhere in the darkness. It was the Beach Boys extolling the virtues of California girls. But when Harbaugh and I saw all the tan bodies and bikinis on the beach, virtue is not a word that came to our minds. The screen door had not been latched, so it made a clatter when I knocked on it. Just a minute, I'm just getting out of the shower, we heard from the murkiness in the apartment. Police, I responded. We'd like to ask you a few questions. I'm single, so I don't usually see women coming fresh out of the shower, except in the movies. So I guess I wasn't prepared for Miss Clancy with a towel wrapped around her body and one around her hair, smelling of lilac and summer all rolled up into one. She was as pretty through the screen door as she had been in the stewardess lounge. And when she opened the screen door to us to let us, and then she opened the screen door to let us in, I almost forgot the questions I was going to ask. Harbaugh usually doesn't get excited unless it's something to eat, but he glowed almost to the point of being feverish.
I think that you captured the two cops, single men awkwardness pretty well there, and that's kind of there's a lot of little moments in your story where you have kind of a little bit of a laugh break, a little something comes along with the description or characterization that kind of, it definitely made me laugh. My question for you is this. Your story shows the human side of a particular crime investigation. Have you known any police detectives or officers from LA? And did anyone in particular inspire you to create those characters?
Well, I have always been a cop show fan. And I was used to watch the old Dragnets. In fact, I still do, I confess. And Dragnets and Naked City and things like that. And as far as my reading preferences go, I enjoy mysteries. And when I started to write this, I was thinking, the main star of Dragnet, Sergeant Friday, what if he was like a real person? What would he be like? And that's how I, tried to write it, kind of the Tin Man with a heart type thing, and tried to, mold that into the story, and hopefully I did. He seemed real to me. And as far as your question, I have not known actually a police person from LA, but I have known from other cities. In my last 20 years before I retired, I worked in Asia. So I worked with FBI and CIA and people. So I kind of got a little, composite personalities that I tried to blend into the story.
And cops tend to have really good stories about the stuff that happens in their work.
They do have two good stories. And I have to say, my favorite author on such types of stories is Michael Connelly. I love his Bosch series. And I can't wait until later this month when the 7th season comes out.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting parallel because your writing did remind me of that. I believe Michael Connelly sets a lot of his in the San Fernando Valley area, and
around LA. And what he really does, and I probably kind of stole from him a little bit when I had Felipe's in the story, but he always highlights where Bosch eats, the restaurants and stuff like that, which I think is kind of neat.
Great. Okay. Yeah. That's cool. That's a connection I had not made up until now.
We're going to go ahead and I'm going to introduce Gaby Lorino, who writes these very comical and also, I just think wow, this is amazing how how dating can be so horrible situations. So thank you, Gaby, for your wonderful story. Take it away.
Sure. Well, this story isn't about dating. It's a nice break for me and for everyone else. But it is a story about two friends of opposite sex who find each other attractive, who never quite made it together, and there's a very important looming reason why. It won't be giving away the whole story to say that because of a drug problem, one of the main characters does pass. And so I'm going to read a little bit from the scene where they're the friends of this man who have known him since he was 15, who are now about 40, are all gathering to remember him. After Danny parked, they walked from the side street onto the sand to the same place they'd met up with friends and classmates 20 years before, Stephen's family beach house. Tristan had treated it like a home away from home, a refuge when he needed it. He had been closer to Stephen than anyone in his own family, and had been since age 15 or so. Wind whipped down the coast. A few tall palms swayed, and their fronds mimicked the sounds of the ocean. Beyond a small group that was congregating, waves crashed on the beach at regular intervals, forming a pattern like breathing in and out. Stephen had shaved his head, and his giant beard was gone too. He greeted Danny and Jen with a nod as they walked across the squeaking sand to the group. He looked more like the kid they'd known in school, but he had some lines around his eyes and a rounder face than before. His wife Kylie stood next to him. Jen and she regarded each other with smiles of vague recognition that came from years of social media usage, then exchanged names and condolences.
Thank you, Gaby. That was very beautiful. I wanted to ask you a question. I wanted to ask you, how are your characters influenced by real life people and their tragedies?
Thank you. I think the funniest thing about turning 40 was I wasn't afraid. I thought it'd be fine, because whatever, you know. But I think if someone had told me, your friends are going to die now, I think I would have been a little bit more upset about getting older. I lost a good friend to cancer, and I lost a good friend to overdose. Sorry. And I dedicated the story to them. I'm very blessed to have dreams of people who are dying and of people who have died. It's always good to know that they're okay. I think that's all I can talk about right now. And interestingly, it's time to introduce Demetria, and that's my job, so I'm going to do it. Demetria specializes in urban fantasy. She has written many interesting stories over the years that we have exchanged through the LA Writers Critique Group. And she has written a story about a very interesting transformation. And Demetria, would you like to read from it, perhaps explain a little bit about it, and then I'll ask you my question?
Yes, thank you so much, Gaby. Okay, so in my story, basically, it's called The Fortune of Three in the Kabuki Mask, and it's basically about a girl who she's an only child. Her parents are older, and they were wishing for a boy and got a girl. So and how that basically, how they're just basically, it's a generational difference between them, so they have a lot of conflict because of that. So I'm going to start reading from, this is set in Chinatown. She just threw away like a bunch of her parents' merchandise. Didn't want it in the shop anyway, because it was Kabuki masks, and it's in a, Chinese American store in Chinatown. So she wasn't too happy or thrilled about it anyway. So I'm going to read from when she threw away the mask after she contaminated them. Okay. Curious to see how big the rats inside might be, I lifted the lid of the dumpster. Some unknown liquid coated the palm of my hand. I rubbed it off on my jeans. They were dirty anyway. The mask that I had dripped blood on stared up at me. I picked it up. The sun's intense light beamed through the eye holes against the side of the dumpster. I closed my eyes and murmured the heart sutra that I had learned from hours of kneeling in front of the gigantic golden Buddha during temple attendance. The Heart Sutra was meant to bring families closer together and create harmony among loved ones. My knees ached with remembrance and repentance. Karma was cruel to give an only girl child parents like mine. I lowered the mask, and a gust of wind knocked the damn thing to the ground. My hair spun around me like strands of a black cocoon. The smell of garlic and ginger that usually coated the muggy afternoon air drifted away with the sudden breeze. The dumpster lid came crashing down. Why couldn't they have had a son as well? My voice sung out, each word whipping through my hair. I picked up the mask and threw it back into the dumpster. I lowered the lid and wiped my hands on my white and black striped t-shirt. I was walking towards our shop when the dumpster rattled. I opened the lid to see the black eye pits of the blood-dripped mask. The mask tilted to the side as I watched. I slammed the lid down. My heart fluttered like that time when Ba collapsed on the sidewalk and we had to call the ambulance to come. I backed away slowly and tugged the ends of my hair. Was this the year of the water horse? The year when a girl like me could make a wish and all the cosmos, full moons, and gods would come together and grant me luck, love, or both? Silly superstitions made Ma visit the fortune teller, eat vegan food, and clean the house on certain days. You couldn't plan your life around the moon cycles or lucky and odd numbers. Besides, we're more American than we are Chinese. Yet there I was, rubbing the wooden prayer beads laced around my wrist and chanting to calm my fears. The thick plastic lid jumped and I screamed. I knew that people could hear me because their placid moon faces appeared within the grimy barred windows of their establishments. They wouldn't ask if I was okay or anything. They would go back to cleaning, smiling, and their customers. Money doesn't wait. I stepped closer to the dumpster and the lid flew open. What the hell? I gasped. The mask came tumbling in a haze of black smoke, bundled together and twisted into tight, fibrous knots. The knots spun until they formed smooth, defined muscles. My eyes grew wide as I turned away to run. I didn't make it 2 steps past the mask. One of the mask's black smoke hands reached out and grabbed me by the shoulder. Wishes, superstitions, and full moons, I shouted. I spit in one of the black eye pits of the mask. The mask creature released its grip on my shoulder. Whatever you do, don't kill me, dude, I said while holding up my hands in what I hoped looked like a gesture of surrender. The Kabuki mask tilted its head as it whispered from the bowels of its gutless form, Sister? Okay, that's it. That's the end of that.
Thank you. It's very exciting. It's very unexpected. For my question, I want to ask, your story features a Kabuki mask that becomes a character. How do you see that character as an Angeleno? And how do female characters from male-dominated cultures fit into your view of people who live in Los Angeles? How do they match one to the other?
The Kabuki mask is like the unfulfilled dream, right? Like we all have unfulfilled dreams. And in Los Angeles, it's the city where people get lost in those dreams. You know, one day they're going to make it. And, you know, and everybody has a side hustle. Everybody has an ambition. And their parents' ambition was to have a son. So she practically, you know, that's, I guess, why I call it the fortune of 3, because it's 3 people wishing for it now. So that's what it's about, wish fulfillment. And so far as her character, she basically resents the fact, you know, that they don't have a son. They wanted a son so very badly, and y'all, you didn't have one, and now you're torturing me, kind of a thing. And I feel that, you know, she lives basically in 2 cultures. She has, you know, the outside culture, and she has her home culture. And when it's convenient for her, because her home culture is obviously something she holds very dear, even though she doesn't want to really admit it. You know, she also has this expectation of how she should be treated, and it has nothing to do with her gender. So that as well.
We have about 10 minutes left, and I think we'll probably want to do the speed round of asking the question, do you like your characters? So if we want to go in order, we can, the order that we went before, we can start with AP and just give us a quick synopsis.
I guess there's only 2 characters in my story, the city or the angel of death, and the main character. I don't know that I write characters that I like almost ever, but they're definitely relatable to me because I try and take one piece of myself and insert it into the character. So as far as this one, I like some aspects of the city, and I like some aspects of the other main character. I do dislike a lot of the main character, though.
Okay, how about Andrea? Andrea.
Hi, I'm so intrigued by that, AP. Yeah, so I love the character in my story, and of course it's closely following her the whole time, and I actually feel like it's there's a duality of the outside of her to everyone else, and then very struggling inside. the internalities. So I do have compassion, and I think that people suffer and struggle very hard. And this was a time where I was trying to really bring that forward, you know. I said earlier that it's a personality disorder. It's also a very difficult one and hard to treat. And the people who have histrionic personality disorder, though it's a small portion of the society, they really do suffer, and it's a high suicide rate. Yeah.
Oh.
Thank you so much. Rosalind, would you like to answer that question as well?
I like my protagonist, and when I first wrote the story, she was really nice. And the more evil she got, the more I liked her. She became so much fun to spend time with. It's just fun to write about characters who aren't totally there. But yeah, I like my character.
Thank you so much. Carter, do you like your characters?
Yeah, I don't think I ever write characters that I don't like on some level, but a lot of times I write characters that I like, and then they get themselves into all kinds of trouble, you know? And they make like really terrible decisions all the time. But I think that that's kind of part of being human, you know? Even when I write like villains, I feel like they usually think they're doing the right thing. So I don't know, it's kind of an exercise in trying to expand my compassion and empathy usually when I write characters and really dig into them. I'm not interested in writing like reprehensible cartoon villains because there's enough of those in real life.
Thank you so much. How about you, AS? Do you like your characters?
I do. I like that. I like that they're true to who they are, and I like that they remind me of my neighborhood. They remind me of the kids on my street. So I like the kids on my street. I like seeing them outside, and I liked pretending to be one of them mentally as I wrote the story. Some of the people, some of the adults, I mean, they're not the greatest people, but I agree with Carter. I think that I enjoy writing people who think they're doing the right thing for their own reasons. I mean, Martin does make a lot of poor choices, but in his head, they're the right choices because it reflects the life he wants to have, that vision you were talking about, that side hustle. But yeah, overall, I like my characters.
How about you? Oh, thank you, AS. Barry, how about you? Do you like your characters that you wrote?
Yeah, I do. And because they were empathetic to some of the other characters that they dealt with, especially empathetic to some of the more vulnerable characters. And so I like that. And the Parnell's decision on the case, maybe I would have done the same thing, but I think empathy was the main thing that made an impression on me, and I liked them for that.
Thank you so much. How about you, Gaby? How do you feel about your characters?
Oh, I definitely like them. It's been a weird journey to grow older and lose friends, and I miss them. And I know one of them had two sons. I know that she's very well missed by her family. But you also develop a appreciation for what you do have when you get to know flaw-filled characters. Nobody's perfect, and sometimes drug use really catches up with a person, and so it's important that you love your friends no matter how messed up they are. What about you, Demetria? Sarah?
Thank you. Actually, I'm more on the side with like AP. I do write like people who are not so nice, and she isn't that great of a person because she's just kind of mocking her parents. She's very judgmental, right? So she thinks she knows everything, kind of a mentality. So I mean, I don't she's not very kind either to her family. So I don't really particularly find her likable, but I do find her engaging. And I do, to an extent, I feel like we all kind of go through that period as a young person where we kind of just, we think we know everything. We're on top of the world. So that is something that I find enduring and very relatable to her, but I don't like her.
You don't have to. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up our meeting. Thank you so much, everyone, for your support. We're indie authors. We appreciate love and attention from everyone who comes into contact with the Made in LA stories and books. If you're out there and you're not a Made in LA author and you're willing, please leave us a review on Amazon or Goodreads, wherever you can rate books, and invite potential readers and writers into the Made in LA family by kind of getting the word out about what we're working on. And if you have the bandwidth for interacting with us online, you can find us on Twitter and on Facebook and Instagram, which is the favorite of our sponsor tonight. And let us know what you think about how we're doing. I want to especially thank Tony and Sideshow Books for all that they've done to help get the word out about the Made in LA stories.
Okay.
And it's been a pleasure.
Pleasure for me. Yes.
All right. Well, with that, we'd like to say good night. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Good to see you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And yeah, come visit. Buy your copy.